Okay, I think we'll get started then. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the 2022 Q2 second quarter meeting for the Next Gen 911 GIS user group. So today we will have our typical lineup. I will discuss just a few things, project update, which is really mostly focused on imagery, the status of the 2021 NG911 imagery. And then Will Trimble will talk about the any updates or information regarding the NG911 toolbox. And then, of course, Sherry Massey will provide a GeoMSAG and training update. So as usual, it's our usual tag team and our standard agenda items for updates. As my usual reminder, we got a lot of data submissions today. I love to see when it seems like we always hit a day where they just start flooding in toward the end of the quarter. So just a friendly reminder that the data submission deadline, if you have not already submitted for this quarter, is next week, June 30th. And we kind of keep an eye on that. So probably next Monday, we'll take a look and see any outstanding missing submissions, and we'll send you a reminder on Monday if we see that you have not submitted for the quarter. So thank you for your submissions and keep them coming. Okay, to get things started off, I'm going to talk about the 911 imagery. Seems like we've been talking about this for quite a while, since we've been through the RFP, the acquisition, for this round of imagery. Of course, as a reminder, this imagery was collected in really pretty much in February and March of 2021. We've been going through, with all of your help, the QA review. Surdex has done processing, everything that needs to happen. So we actually just received the hard drives with the imagery late yesterday afternoon. So hooray, we have imagery in the office. So now that we have it, we've got a few things to do on our side. What we will do, of course, is review the imagery. And since it's all public domain this time, we will, one of the first things we'll do is create a statewide public image service that'll be available that you can link to and use. We'll also make it available for download in the Mr. SID file format, which again will be the USGS 24K tile grid. That's what that's based on. And then if you have a large order, we're asking people just to use the imagery download. If you're, your county, you'll have to click, 16 tiles, something like that. You should be able to, that shouldn't take too long. But if you have a large order, like you want a region or several counties, contact us, and if you provide an external hard drive, we can copy that over onto an external hard drive for you. The other thing we'll do with the imagery, of course, is create a dedicated tile cache for the Hosted Solutions Rapid Deploy mapping software, just for that web map. So right now in the web map that all the telecommunicators use, it is using the statewide 2018 imagery. So when we have it all processed and ready, it'll be a full replacement statewide, and an announcement will go out with that, letting everyone know that it's been replaced, and they will be viewing then at that time 2021 imagery. So we're very excited to get this imagery out in front of the telecommunicators, who are really the, thanks to the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council and a few other state agencies, are the, the main primary funding source for this imagery. So we're pretty lucky. This is our third iteration of the imagery, with plans to continue this update cycle every 3 years. So we're pretty lucky to have that established in Kansas. As a reminder, if you're interested in local imagery buy-up, it is a 3-year contract with Surdex, so that is still available. If you have any questions about that, or if you're interested, feel free to contact Jack King, who's our resource over at Surdex. He'd be happy to help you out with that, and to define your area of interest and give you a quote and everything if you want, maybe just your city's flown or your county at a different resolution or something like that. The other thing I needed to mention in all this exciting news that we're getting imagery, as if you haven't noticed, there's a new DASK website. So we migrated the DASK website over to ArcGIS Hub. It's based on the ArcGIS Hub technology. So it looks a little different, but it looks kind of similar too. As you can see, you go to the front page, there's some similar menus. You can search for your data right there with the search bar, or you can explore via data category. So this is kind of my reminder that when the data is available, which won't still be for another 2 to 3 weeks, it takes us some time to copy it all off the hard drives, do an inventory and kind of a quick QA of the data, and then get them packaged up and zipped, organized for services. So it takes us, you know, a few weeks to get all that taken care of. But then when it is available, we'll be distributing, of course, through the DASK website. And so I thought, well, if you have any old bookmarks of from the last website or to anything of that sort, now's the time to get familiar with the new DASK website and maybe update your bookmarks to explore the data's out there. And then when it's available, where the image will be available as well. So we're very excited about the new DASK website. And this is where it will be. So of course you can search from that top menu there that I showed in this last snapshot. So this is, when you go to the home page, this is the first view. When you scroll down a little bit, we have different categories. And one of the first things we have in there is download Kansas imagery. So this is actually a grid where you can select from the tile base, which is generally 24K quad. And then it'll show you what imagery is available for download. Of course, the 2021 isn't there yet, but coming soon. So this is where if you wanted to go back and grab some imagery from 2018 or 2015 or NAPE or anything like that, that is available through this download grid under the popular content section on the website. So it might be a good idea to go check that out now and kind of familiarize yourself with that grid and the download process. So we're going to be, well, by we, I mean Brent Miller, who takes care of all the data, the imagery processing in our office. He has been and will continue to be very busy the next few weeks. Another thing I want to talk about was just imagery in general. I want to kind of give a shout out to Surdex as part of our contract through the Kansas Coordinating Council. There's a clause in that says if there's a major event, some sort of an emergency disaster event in Kansas, we can ask Surdex if they're available to fly imagery for us to capture that event. So that clause was enacted after the Andover tornado. They were able to get a plane in the air and capture imagery. I think it was less than 48 hours after the actual tornado that affected both Butler and Sedgwick County. So once they were able to capture that imagery and deliver it, they put it up in SurCheck, and then we found it was a wider audience that needed to look at the imagery. So Will Trimble in our office put together a web application that contained the tornado imagery, as well as the yet to be delivered, but delivered for this purpose, the 2021 imagery, where the locals, I think we had some legislature request this information as well, where they could go and use a swipe tool and look at the tornado path, which was provided by Pam Dunham in Butler County and Jack Joseph in Sedgwick County. So they could look at the tornado path as well as compare the imagery before and after the event. So that was pretty amazing to be able to use that very special extra clause in the contract to be able to capture this imagery that quickly and make it available for our local GIS personnel, as well as share it with legislature to get a quick view of the damage on the ground. So we greatly appreciate Surdex's quick response to that. So the image there is just a quick snapshot of one of the neighborhoods. As usual, the tornado, totally destroyed some houses, and then the house, next door looks fine. Totally bizarre. So really impressive to see that imagery. In other imagery news, just a reminder, the 2015 and the 2018 Next Gen 911 imagery is all public domain. It's already available on the DASK website in all these formats I've talked about. You can use the image service. You can download the Mr. Sid files. And again, if you have a large request, you can submit that request to us at DASK, and we can put that on an external hard drive that you provide for you. So as you can see, Brent Miller has his work cut out for him, because we just constantly get a lot of big data, which we love. So it's great. So, appreciate Brent being able to manage all this data inventory and putting it into sensible files for us to download and be able to use in an image service. So an announcement should go out as soon as it's ready. I would expect that next 2 to 3 weeks, you'll be getting an email, or even just check back to the DASK website, whatever you prefer. And we'll make sure it's widely known when the 2021 imagery is ready and available. Okay, well, that is the bulk of my project update. With that, we will switch over to Toolbox, and I will hand it off to Will Trimble.
Thanks, Eileen, and good afternoon, everybody. Nothing too crazy in the toolbox. There's a few things we've talked about in the past and discussed that we're coming down the line that we're going to try and implement for next quarter. So that's the biggest change that we're going to have there. So, yeah. So the first small change we touched on briefly last time is just something on address point submit field and making sure we're checking for null or empty values. We found a small number of records that had gotten through based on a logic check we were doing. Essentially, I just treated those as the same as having a no value in that field. It was just not submitting them like any other record. So we corrected that loop, and then there's some toolbox feedback in the template check results and the field values check results table that you can see down below that just lets you know that you've got some of those presents and links to them like you would normally from the field value check result table, so you can correct them as needed. Then the big change for this release is going to be the checking for address point GeoMSAGs overlapping with your road center lines. So we've got a tool that's just going to convert those address point GeoMSAGs to plines, check them against your road center lines, and then give you some feedback in the resulting tables. This is something that kind of came up based on some issues we were having in the data, and it also happens to work with some conversions work we're doing behind the scenes for the MSAG. So it was a good time to put it in. So this first quarter, which is going to be next quarter, quarter 3 of 2022, we're going to implement that into the automatic check, and then you also have a tool in the toolbox that you can manually run that check. And it's going to report these as notices, so it's not going to prevent you from submitting as an error normally would until quarter 4. So that'll give you some time to become familiar with the tool, what the error reports are going to look like, some of the extra files we're going to include along with some documentation, and then quarter 4 that'll switch over to an error and prevent you from submitting if they still haven't been resolved. We do have a few being used currently right now in a beta test group for the PSP conversion. It's about 16 PSAPs. You know, for reference, 11 of them had no errors with the address point GeoMSAGs. 5 of them had some errors with the average of about 6, and the high being 12 and the low being 1. So it's not something that's going to be a lot of work to correct. You're looking at a small number of address points for most people if there is an issue. So something you can do in an afternoon once you run the tool for the first time and become familiar just with the format of the error results and kind of get an idea of what's going on with the analysis that you are familiar with. Just that overall process. So basically, we're just taking that address point GeoMSAG that was sort of a free-for-all tag to avoid getting any kind of errors and adding just a small layer of double checking in the data. Then the last thing coming down the line in the future that we've touched on in one of the other meetings is just changing some of the levels for submission control, which I think we're going to roll out with data model 3. And this just has to do with locally handling how you want your data to progress through our system, whether you want it to be something that's just on your local end that you're submitting along with the rest of your data, but we're going to completely ignore it. Something you want to go to address locators and rapid deploy, but not to your MSAG and EGDMS, and then something you want to use for all 3. And we have something in place for that now, but there's a few small things we could change in the existing model, more or less, that will give you a little more control over those 3 things. And yeah, always nice to have more control over where your data is going, how we're using it, and give you the option to limit or expand those uses as needed. So that's about it for the toolbox for this quarter. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you have any problems with your submissions this quarter, you get stuck with any errors or anything else, and you'd like to reach out to me and take a look at it together and have a discussion about it, I'm here and happy to do that. And yeah, thank you for being here, and thanks for your time.
All right, great. Thanks, Will. And feel free to submit any questions in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that so we can loop back. And if you end up with a question for Will or even Sherry, as I hand off to Sherry, I'll watch the chat. But there'll be some time at the end here to ask questions as well. So now I'll hand it off to Sherry Massey.
who had some trouble getting off of mute. Thanks, Eileen, and thank you to everybody for showing up. We're going to go over our regular MSAG and training update. So if you go ahead. First, I want to make a little comment about the data model and just kind of give you an idea of where things are. Like Will said, we do have a couple of things that are waiting on version 3.0. But 3.0 is not, the work on that has not even begun yet. It will start when NINA's national data model version 2 is actually published. That has been in the works for a couple of years now. And just last week, the doc finished up with its second public review. And the way this works is if the committee has to get back together and review all of the comments that came from that public review. And if their addressing of those comments results in a substantial change to the document, then it ends up having to go out for a third public review. But most likely, because there were just a small number of comments that were available for people, or a small number of sections that were available for people to talk about in the second review, there will be no substantial changes. And if that happens, it will publish shortly. So could be real soon. We'll start on version 3. Could be another few months as we go through another round of public review. Really depends on what happens with that national data model. Once we have that and we can begin working there, of course, one of the first things we'll do is correlate what we're doing in our Kansas data model to meet the requirements of that national one, and then begin working on anything else that needs to get added or adjusted. And one of the big things that we've talked about and that people have requested is a good series of examples for the information that Will was talking about on, if I put this flag here and this flag here, where does my data go? How do I get it onto the map in front of the telecommunicators without getting it somewhere else? Just generally trying to help clarify for you guys specifically how you can flag your data, and kind of with the scenarios that we've seen so far and the questions that we've had, how best to handle that. So all of that will be coming, and the substantial work on the document itself, on the version 3 document itself, will be waiting for the national version 2. So, and now we'll talk about the MSAG a little bit. So I've talked to everybody at 3 or 4 different versions of meetings for the Next Gen 911 project about the public safety platform. So I won't go into it in huge detail other than to say that currently your MSAG is stored in a database that is owned by the company Intrado, and by the 4th of August, it will be moved into a database owned by AT&T. It's always been AT&T's database. It's just a question of who owned sort of the background software and and hardware. So we've put together a beta test team, and for those of you on the call that are on the team, thank you very much for volunteering. And they'll be working through issues in both the GIS data processing that will happen to get changes into the MSAG and PSP, and to help us establish procedures for ongoing MSAG maintenance, particularly so that as we convert to PSP, we can let you know really what's expected of you. AT&T has agreed to give access to all GIS data maintainers and data stewards in to see the MSAG. This is a big change. Under Intrado, there was a limit of 2 people per 911 center, and we got them to bend on that a few times, but not as often as we would like. And moving to AT&T, they are fully aware that GIS has a major role in this and have no limits, and what's more, encourage both the steward and the maintainer to have access, even if it's just to take a look. So when I say procedures, what I'm talking about is because you'll have access as a GIS data steward or maintainer into the MSAG, we want to be able to give you some guidance on really what is the best thing for you to be doing. Once you've submitted your GIS data and it's all processed through, if you run into questions or concerns, where can you go look? how often should you look, what should you expect, and who should you report to with any problems or specific types of problems that you see. So the beta test team is going to help us kind of establish all of that by being our guinea pigs to go in and start messing with the data to begin with. But to step back to the test that is going in Q3 as a notice for the GeoMSAG flag, we have always in the past, and we are this time as well, starting with a full quarter where the message comes in as a notice so that you have plenty of time to get used to it before it becomes a validation failure. That said, if you are part of obviously the beta test group, or if we end up at the PSP conversion, which does not have a real solid timeline, unfortunately, if we end up at that point before we get to Q4, your data won't go in. Those count as overlaps for PSP. So if it comes up that we need you to treat those like errors earlier than they show up as errors, we'll contact you and say, hey, these are the errors that are coming up when we attempt to do the PSP conversion, and we're going to need you to fix that in the data. So we'll communicate with you directly should that be the case. But I do encourage you, while this is a notice, while you are getting it in your validation tests, that you go ahead and take a little bit of time and fix it just as soon as you have the opportunity. Like Will said, the volume is super low for most places. And in fact, quite a few don't have any of these errors at all. So one of the reasons that we may have to press you just a little earlier than it comes as a validation error is because PSP was actually built for our data. AT&T invited us to assist them with the structuring of how PSP translates GIS data. We're super encouraged by the accuracy of the translations compared to what we've been dealing with Entrado for quite some time. But the thing is, those flags, the authoritative, submit, and GeoMSAG specifically, are all built into their logical processes. So where it's been a little fast and loose for the last few years, where everybody kind of understood what they were, but maybe there were some errors in the data, or like Will pointed out, maybe some nulls in a few places or something like that, that's going to cause real problems in PSP, because when we said this is what our data looks like, they took us at our word. And so we're going to be giving you more guidance and probably having to build a few more validation tests just to clean up some of the things that we thought we had covered. But now that somebody else is processing on it, we discovered maybe we had a few logicals. So if you have questions about how those are to be used, you can get with Will or myself or Eileen, and we'll be more than happy to go over it with you, especially if you have some unusual circumstances. And we're hoping to have some documentation you can consult rather than having to reach out, but something that you can kind of have at your side before the PSP conversion. So that's it for that. And then for training, there is a data maintainer class pre-conference at CAM from 9 to 12 on Tuesday, October 18th. The registration is free, but you do have to sign up for it, and that registration link is open. And please sign up. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you guys in person. I was not able to attend last year. I will be able to be there in person this year, and I'm pretty excited about it. Also, the new learning platform that the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council has to provide training out to telecommunicators also has room in it for GIS folks. And like I have mentioned before, the steward, particularly the data steward, but also the data maintainer class will be available on that platform. I'm going to make the class as the data maintainer class as good as I can on that platform, obviously, but there will not be a substitute for being able to ask questions in class or to hear what your fellow attendees are asking, and to hear kind of the troubles that they're going through, or the most recent questions that have been asked, because those may not be in that pre-recorded material. So I'm excited to be able to put these classes together, but I still encourage you, if you have the opportunity to every once in a while come to a live class. And I believe that covers it for training.
All right, thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Sherry? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Okay, let's see here. So a couple more things to close things off. We actually are going to be on record time today. So I mentioned the new desk website where you will be able to download the new imagery as where you currently can download the existing imagery. On that homepage, if you scroll down a little further, there's a whole section on DASK initiatives and projects. So I'd also encourage you to click on the NG911 section under initiatives, so you can kind of see how it's got the same information that was on our previous website, just kind of ported over and dressed it up a little bit. It looks a little bit better. I might still move things around here a little bit because there's so much information to share on the Next Gen 911 project GIS focus that I feel like there's even more content we could be putting out there. So it might be a good idea. This is where we put, for example, the recording of this presentation and the slides under the GIS user group menu item there, as well as any other documents, content, things we have out there. So I check back here pretty often. I think things will start moving, and we'll probably add a link to or some information about the training that Sherry talked about as well. And as a reminder, this is where you can find us. So every time we have this webinar, we record it and put the slides out on the Coordinating Council's website, as well as the DASK GeoPortal Hub. And that's actually a direct link to the NG911 initiative. That's the URL. They'll take you right to the NG911 information page. Okay, well, with that, yeah, look at that. We're under half an hour. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'll just give a minute to see if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question of myself or Sherry or Will, since we have a couple extra minutes today. All right. Okay, good, nice quiet group. Okay. Well, like I said, we'll post all this in case you know someone didn't get to join us today. We'll have it posted out there. And as always, feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions or concerns, and get signed up for that maintainer training at CAM. I'm sure I'm going to encourage Will to participate in that as well. And maybe even do, him and I do some presentations at CAM as well. So, so look into CAM if you have the time and you're able to attend this year. Okay, well, with that, I don't see any questions in the chat. So thank you everyone for your time today, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.